Hello everybody. In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about what separates the good photos from the really great photos. So this is something that I've had on my mind thinking about making a video for a while. So I decided today I was going to sit down and just wing it and talk about what I think separates those really good photos from the absolute best of the best photos. These are questions that I get in my email inbox all the time with people asking, what do you think my best photos are for my website? Do you think this photo looks nice? How about this photo? And yada, yada, so on. So I want to make a little video about what I think makes the best photos, as well as show you guys a few of my own images and walk you through what makes them good, better, or best, depending on exactly what is going on in the image. So I'm going to talk you guys through all of that. And before we get into it, I just want to remind everyone that these are just my personal opinions. Of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Landscape photography is an art form. So whatever you think looks great is just perfect for you. This is simply just my opinion on photography and landscape photography in general. So take it or leave it, take it with a grain of salt, whatever you want. Just know that these are my personal opinions and you are more than welcome to disagree with what I have to say. I just wanted to let you know how I feel about it in hopes that maybe it will help you kind of shape your feelings of the same topic. So the first image that I want to look at is this one from Crater Lake here. Now, it's not a terrible image, but the reason that this photo is something that I would consider just good rather than great or one of my best shots is because the composition is pretty lacking. So you'll see in this photo, not only is the composition lacking, the edit is not too terribly good, and nothing that exciting is happening. Of course, there is a few clouds in the sky, but it's nothing incredibly vastly different than what you would normally see at Crater Lake. One of the things that I think makes a huge difference in terms of those great photos over the good photos is the rarity of whatever you're photographing. So those great photos are going to be things that are super rare, where you found a really nice composition and you've really helped get your viewer into the scene. This photo from Crater Lake simply just doesn't really do that. There's not really any foreground elements to walk your viewer into the scene. Nothing incredibly rare is happening. I mean, you've got a nice little sunset going on, but it's nothing too terribly special. This is a photo that I shot a really long time ago when I first started photography. And these days, I would definitely have done things differently, but this is what I've got. So I would still consider this a good photo because I do like the cool clouds in the scene, as well as the dark little Wizard Island and rest of Crater Lake, but it's definitely not one of my greatest photos. So this photo here is actually quite the opposite of the last one. This photo, we actually do have a compelling composition with the sand dune kind of leading into the scene. We've got some nice light hitting the sand dune, but there's really nothing special happening in the sky. The sky is really boring, and in a really great photo, every element in your scene needs to have something interesting going on. So you need to have some clouds in the sky, or maybe you need to have something in the foreground, or whatever it may be. And this photo is just simply lacking that really great, compelling sky. However, it does have the composition. So now we'll move on to another image that I shot backpacking in Washington at this really remote lake. And I really love this lake because it's really far out there. It's many, many miles off any road. So it's tons of hiking, tons of nights out of backpacking to get this photo. And I really liked it because the lake is rarely photographed and rarely seen, and the color just looked great on the lake. However, I still don't really consider this a great photo because nothing interesting is going on in the scene. Maybe if there was some low-hanging fog or clouds, or there was some nice light coming in from the side, it would be interesting, but it's just simply not super interesting because it's just a basic photo of a lake. And as much as I love this photo and love the adventure behind it, I can't put it in front of some of my other photos just because of the thoughts that it provokes for me, because I have to think of the viewer. And while the viewer gets to see this really cool lake, there's not really a cool foreground or anything like that. It simply just looks like a high alpine lake. Now, this photo I would consider a great photo for me. And the reason is because this really has the trifecta of all the interesting elements. You've got a really nice foreground with some cool flower elements. You have a really nice sunset going on, and you have some light bleeding into the scene, which adds a lot of depth. The one thing you're going to notice in the next few photos that I show you, which I would all consider to be some really great images, better than a lot of my good images, is the difference is that the light is bleeding into the scene. One thing that you're going to find with photography is that lighting is so important. And when you first start landscape photography, it might seem easier to shoot in really flat conditions, but what's going to really help you step it up and take those great photos is when you go out and shoot when the light is hitting particular spots of your scene, which creates a lot of depth. Now, I don't mean go and shoot out at high noon, middle of the day. When you go out right before sunset or right after sunrise, just a few minutes before sunset or just a few minutes after sunrise, that sun will come up and it might light up a particular part of your scene. Now, that is going to add a ton of depth to your scene. Give this a try and see how it works for you. But this is what I love doing. I always show up really early for sunsets and I always stay really late for sunrises. So this photo here is a little bit more of the same. You can see I've got this really, really cool dark sky with the sunlight just hitting below it and hitting my foreground. Now that sun hitting the foreground makes a huge difference in the scene that you don't even realize. Without the sun in the scene, and if I just had these clouds and this cool foreground, I would think that I would have a good photo, but I wouldn't have something that I'd consider great. What really makes this great is the rarity of these really dark clouds in the sky, as well as this sunlight shining through to hit the foreground to add just a little bit of depth to the scene and make it seem a little more realistic. As I mentioned before, a flat image just simply would not look as good as this one with the light coming through. You can see how big of a difference the light really makes in your image. This is one of my favorite photos and one that I would consider one of my best just simply because of the conditions. This is another photo that I would consider a really great image of mine. And the reason why I consider this one great is because I waited a little bit longer after sunrise to get this shot. You can see how it looks like the sun has risen a little bit in the sky, kind of providing a little bit of soft light hitting the scene. And it's definitely adding a little bit of luminance to the rest of the scene. Now, I have some shots from earlier this morning where the clouds were a little more pink and red that I really like, but the problem is my foreground is just really flat. So by waiting for that sun to come up, I've allowed myself to create a really great image because of the depth that it provides when the light is hitting the rest of the image. Again, this image I consider one of my best because it's got that nice foreground in my opinion. We've got the nice little rocks that kind of walk you into the scene. We've got a really cool subject. We've got this big mountain lake as well as a nice, really jagged mountain in the background. And we've got that rare condition of the sunset. So those three things, the foreground, the subject, and the rare condition really are going to be what takes that photo over the top. Now, this is a photo that I took a few weeks ago. I don't consider it to be one of my best or really a great photo, but I do consider it to be a good photo. The reason why I don't consider it to be really super great is that even though the photo is really interesting, you've got this really cool canyon with some water coming through, there's really nothing unique happening. There's no crazy light coming in or there's no fog or anything like that. It's just simply a photo of a canyon with some water coming through it. So for that reason, I don't find it incredibly interesting, but I do find it to be a good photo. So always think about the light. So I understand that you're not always going to get those great sunsets, which is why I wanted to include this one last photo here that I would consider to be a great image and one of my best. And the reason why this image is great is because you can see the rarity of the event. I've got this little baby mountain goat out in the middle of nowhere in the Alpine Lakes wilderness. I was on a backpacking trip. The sunset wasn't going to happen. There was really nothing crazy happening. It was a clear blue sky, and I found this little baby mountain goat. So I sat down in a particular spot, and I was hoping that he would step on top of this rock so I could capture him backlit by the sun. And this really helped me to get a really great photo that night. So a lot of photographers would have just went out and they had planned to shoot this lake that we were camping at. So they would have just posted up by the lake for this nice clear blue sky. They would have got some decent photos because it's a pretty cool lake, but it's a clear blue sky, so it's not super interesting. So instead, I was thinking outside the box and I wanted to try and capture something that was an absolutely stunning photo this night. So I sold myself to try and capture photos of this goat. I didn't bother capturing photos of the lake. I just set myself up in hopes that I'd capture this photo of this really cool baby mountain goat. So always be thinking about utilizing light in your image and capturing what's interesting. When you go out to capture an image, most photographers can capture a good image if it's a really cool scenic spot. But the difference between the photographers that capture good images and great images are that the ones that are getting great images are going out and they're capturing whatever the light is providing to be interesting. So a lot of times you're not going to get that wide angle, big blue, a big beautiful sky with some nice clouds. You're just simply not going to get that. So the best photographers out there are the ones that are looking for what's interesting with the light that's provided. If it's a clear blue sky, maybe you throw on your telephoto lens and you capture a little more intimate details of the light hitting a particular peak in the background or a rock or this or that, or who knows what it could be. But the best photographers go out to a location and they don't have a predetermined shot in mind. They don't simply just post up at the edge of the lake and take a photo and hope that the sunset's good. They are out there trying to figure out what's going to be interesting with the light that's provided. So that's the biggest thing that you need to think about with this video is always try and figure out how you can get the best possible photo. Don't get too locked into any particular thing. Always think about your composition. And like I said, your absolute best photos are going to be your photos that combine a great foreground, a very interesting subject, and unique conditions, whether this be light rays, whether it be fog, whether it be a really killer sunset, whatever it may be. But those three things are the recipe for a great photo. Thank you guys so much for checking out this week's video. I would absolutely love to know what you guys think makes a great photo in the comments. So please let me know what you think about my opinions. I'd love to hear yours. Like I said, I don't think that my opinion is any more right than yours would be. This is just simply my opinion on what makes the greatest photos. Hopefully this was helpful for you to help you decide which photos of yours are your absolute best. And as always, I'm happy to answer any questions down in the comments. As always, guys, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps me out as an artist and it helps me keep creating these videos for you guys. Really appreciate your support. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next weekend. Bye-bye.